Betty! I stopped so suddenly, Lily shifted against my shoulder. My father's truck had pulled onto the shoulder 10 feet ahead of me. Dad climbed out, stared at the diaper bag hanging from my arm, the pharmacy bag crushed in my hand, then looked down at the way I was favoring my left foot. What are you doing out here? I'm fine, Dad. You're limping. My shoe rubbed my heel. It's nothing. He glanced at the road behind me. There was no bus stop nearby, no parked car, just a long stretch of sidewalk leading back toward Patricia's neighborhood. Dad pointed at Lily. You walked here carrying the baby? I just needed something from the pharmacy. His eyes narrowed. Why didn't you drive? I looked away. That was the one question I had been hoping nobody would ask. Dad waited. Then he said, Betty, where's your car? I adjusted Lily higher on my hip. Patricia has it. He blinked. Your mother-in-law borrowed your car. No. The word barely came out. She took my keys. Dad's expression changed. I rushed to explain before he could react. There was an argument. She thought I'd been going out too much, and she said since Daniel and I are staying in her house, there have to be rules. What does that have to do with your car? I swallowed. She said I'd gotten too comfortable. Dad stared at me, and then she said I was lucky they let me stay there. For a second, he said absolutely nothing. That silence frightened me more than shouting would have. Because Dad knew that car, he had gone with me years earlier when I bought it. I had paid for it before I ever married Daniel. Patricia had never put $1 toward it. Dad finally asked, how long has she had your keys? I stared at the pharmacy bag. 11 days, his jaw tightened. 11. It's complicated. No, Betty. Someone taking your property for 11 days is not complicated. My phone buzzed. I looked down automatically. Daniel, where are you? Another message appeared before I could answer. Why is the pharmacy taking this long? Dad saw my face. Is that your husband? I locked the screen. He's just wondering when I'll be home. Dad looked at my scraped heel again. Does Daniel know his mother took your car? He reached for Lily's diaper bag. Dad, give me that. He took it from my shoulder, opened the passenger door of his truck, and nodded toward the seat. Get in the car. My stomach tightened. I need to get back before Patricia starts asking where I am. Dad's eyes met mine. She already took your car. You're walking miles with my granddaughter because you're afraid of upsetting her. I'm not dropping you back there and pretending I didn't see this. Dad, Daniel said he was going to handle it. When? I had no answer. He held the door open. We're fixing this tonight. Something in his voice told me the conversation was over. I climbed inside with Lily. For the first minute, I thought Dad was taking us to his house. Then he passed the turn. My chest tightened. Dad, he kept driving. Dad, where are we going? You know where. The streets became familiar. Patricia's neighborhood. I stared through the windshield as my phone buzzed again and again in my lap. Because my father thought he was about to confront my mother-in-law over a missing car. He had no idea that once he started asking questions, he was going to discover the car was only the first thing they had taken control of. And for the first time, I had to ask myself the question I had been avoiding for months. What was going to happen when Dad found out everything? Dad didn't lecture me on the drive. That somehow made it worse. He kept both hands on the wheel and asked questions one at a time. When did Patricia take the keys? 11 days ago. Where is the car now? I don't know. He glanced at me. You don't know where your own car is? She said she had someone move it. Who? She didn't say. Dad looked back at the road. And Daniel? I shifted Lily against my chest. She had finally fallen asleep. What about him? Why did your husband allow his mother to take your car? I stared out the passenger window. Dad, we're living in her house. That wasn't my question. I closed my eyes for a second. Daniel and I had moved into Patricia's house after Lily was born because it was supposed to make things easier. I had taken unpaid maternity leave. Our savings had dropped faster than we expected, and Patricia offered us 4 months rent-free. At first it sounded generous. She cooked dinner. She offered to hold Lily while I showered. She told us to save everything we could, but slowly every favor seemed to come with a rule. If I left the house, Patricia wanted to know where I was going. If I bought groceries, she asked how much I spent. If I took Lily to see my parents twice in 1 week, Patricia would say, again? The first time she did it, I laughed. The 5th time, I stopped laughing. Dad asked, did she always act like this? No, I thought about it. Not at first. What changed? I think once she realized we needed the house, Dad said nothing. I continued because now that I had started, the words were coming faster. She'd say things like, "You don't understand how expensive it is to support 3 extra people. Were you paying for anything? Our own food, Lily's things, our phone bills, insurance, everything except rent and utilities." Dad's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "Completely yours?" Yes, I already knew why he was asking. He had helped me buy it 2 years before I met Daniel. Still, hearing myself say it made the situation sound different, more obvious. Dad asked, "Why were you going to your parents' house 11 days ago?" "To visit." "That's it? That's it?" I looked down at Lily. That morning, I had come downstairs with a diaper bag and told Patricia I was taking Lily to see Mum and Dad. Patricia had been sitting at the kitchen island drinking coffee. "You were there last week," she said. I stopped near the door. "I know. So why are you going again?" "Because I want to see them." She lowered her mug. "You've been running over there constantly, twice this month." Patricia frowned. "Betty, you have responsibilities here." I remember almost laughing because I genuinely didn't understand what she meant. "My responsibilities are coming with me." I nodded toward Lily. Patricia's face hardened. "That attitude is exactly what I'm talking about." I stared at her. "What attitude? You live under my roof, and lately you've been acting like nobody can tell you anything." I remember feeling something inside me finally push back. "I'm 31, Patricia. I don't need permission to visit my parents." She went silent. That should have warned me. That evening, I reached into my purse for my keys. They were gone. I searched the kitchen counter, the entry table, the diaper bag. Daniel watched me from the couch. "What are you looking for?" "My keys." Patricia walked in from the hallway. "I have them." I looked at her. "Why?" She folded her arms. "Because you need to calm down." I laughed once, thinking she had to be joking. "Give me my keys." "No." Daniel stood up. "Betty, just leave it tonight." I turned toward him. "Excuse me? Everybody's angry. We'll talk tomorrow." "There's nothing to talk about. Those are my keys." Patricia looked at Daniel. He looked at me. "Just let it go for one night." I should have pushed harder. Instead, I was tired. Lily had been crying. I didn't want another fight, so I went upstairs. The next morning, I looked out the window. My car was gone. Dad's voice pulled me back. "Who moved it?" I swallowed. Patricia said she had someone take it somewhere safe. "Someone?" "Yes." Dad frowned. "Does Daniel have a spare key?" The air inside the truck suddenly felt too warm. I turned toward him. He repeated it. "Betty, does Daniel have another key?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." Dad looked straight ahead. "And Patricia?" I had spent 11 days thinking Daniel was too afraid to stand up to his mother. I had never once asked myself whether he had helped her. Dad didn't say it for me. He just asked, how else would she move a locked car? I stared at my phone. Daniel's messages suddenly felt different. Not worried, not confused, controlled. Dad turned into Patricia's street. "Maybe he didn't," I whispered. "Maybe." He pulled into the driveway. "Then we'll ask him." "Dad, wait." He was already unbuckling his seatbelt. "Please don't make this worse." He looked at me. "I'm not the one who made it worse." Then he stepped out. I watched through the windshield as he walked up the front path and rang the bell. My heart pounded. The door opened. Patricia stood there, and right behind her was Daniel. Dad looked at both of them, lifted one hand, palm up, and said, "Car keys." Patricia didn't move. She looked at Dad's open hand, then passed him toward the truck where I was getting out with Lily. "What is this?" Dad kept his voice level. "Betty's car keys." Daniel stepped forward. "Marcus, this is a private family matter." Dad turned toward him. "My daughter is standing here with a blistered foot because she had to walk to a pharmacy, carrying your 8-month-old daughter. Her property is being withheld from her. We're past pretending that's private." I felt heat rush into my face. Across the street, a man washing his SUV had stopped moving. 2 houses down, a woman was bringing grocery bags inside and kept glancing toward us. Patricia noticed them too. Her voice dropped. "There is absolutely no reason to create a spectacle in my neighborhood." "Then give Betty her keys." "You don't understand the situation." Dad nodded toward me. "Then explain it." Patricia folded her arms. "Betty and Daniel live here without paying rent. I have opened my home to them, helped with their baby, fed them, supported them, and Betty has repeatedly ignored basic household expectations. I stepped closer. What household expectation gives you the right to take my car? Patricia looked directly at me. You were constantly running back to your parents whenever something happened here. Something like what? You know exactly what I mean. Dad interrupted. Is the car yours? Patricia ignored him. Marcus, your daughter has become increasingly disrespectful since moving into my home. Dad asked again. Is the car yours? Her mouth tightened. That isn't the point. It's the only point I'm asking about. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Can everybody stop? Dad didn't look away from Patricia. Did you buy the car? No. Did Daniel buy it? Patricia's silence lasted several seconds. No. So it belongs to Betty. Patricia gave a stiff shrug. Technically, I almost couldn't believe the word. Technically, she lives here, Patricia snapped. There have to be consequences when someone refuses to respect the household. Dad turned toward Daniel. How did your mother move Betty's car? Daniel's face changed, only slightly. But I saw it. He looked at Patricia before answering. That detail doesn't matter. Something cold settled in my stomach. Dad had asked me one question in the truck. Does Daniel have a spare key? I looked at my husband. Daniel, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Did you give her the spare? Betty, don't do this out here. Did you give your mother the spare key to my car? Patricia stepped in. This is ridiculous. I raised my voice. Daniel, he finally looked at me. Yes. Everything around me seemed to go quiet. Even Lily had stopped fussing. I stared at him. You gave it to her? I thought everyone needed a few days to calm down. 11 days. I didn't think it would become this. You knew my car was gone. Of course I knew. And every time I asked you to get it back, I was trying to keep the peace. I laughed once, but there was nothing funny in it. You watched me rearrange Lily's pediatric appointment because I didn't have transportation. Daniel lowered his voice. Betty, you watched me walk to the grocery store. My mother said she'd return it when things settled down. Dad stepped between us slightly. Where is the vehicle? Patricia answered before Daniel could. Somewhere safe. Where? I'm not telling you. Dad stared at her. Patricia looked at me instead. When Betty starts showing some respect for this household, she can have her car back. For 11 days, I had been asking, explaining, waiting for Daniel to fix it. Now, hearing Patricia say it in front of everyone made the truth impossible to soften. You're holding my car until I behave the way you want? I'm teaching you that choices have consequences. No, you're using something I own to control where I can go. Patricia's face hardened. Then maybe you shouldn't live here. There it was, the sentence that had ended every argument for months. Normally I would have gone quiet because I was on unpaid leave, because moving was expensive, because Lily was 8 months old, because Patricia knew exactly how frightening instability felt to a new mother. I looked at Daniel. This was the moment I expected him to finally say enough. Instead, he sighed. Maybe Betty and Lily should stay with her parents for a few days. I stared at him. You want us to leave? Temporarily, until everybody calms down. Behind me, Dad said nothing. He didn't need to. For the first time, Patricia's threat sounded different. She could throw me out, but I had somewhere to go. I shifted Lily against my shoulder. Then I walked toward the front door. Patricia blinked. Where are you going? To pack. Betty, don't be dramatic. I kept walking. Dad called after me. Take what you and Lily need. I stepped past Daniel into the house. Nobody stopped me. And as I reached the stairs, I heard Dad speak behind me. His voice was quiet enough that Patricia's neighbors probably couldn't hear it. But Daniel could. Before she comes back down, you should decide whether you want to tell her where that car is or explain why you helped hide it. I had Lily's small suitcase open on the bed when Daniel came upstairs. I didn't look at him. I packed diapers, pajamas, Lily's medication, 2 bottles, then opened the drawer where I kept our important documents. Daniel closed the bedroom door behind him. Your dad had no right to come here and talk to my mother like that. I stopped folding one of Lily's shirts. That's what you came upstairs to say? He humiliated her in front of the neighbors. I put the shirt into the suitcase. You gave your mother the spare key to my car. Betty, why? He exhaled sharply. Because Mom thought you needed boundaries. My hand froze over the suitcase. I turned around. Boundaries from whom? Your mother or you? Daniel looked away, and suddenly, things I had spent months treating as separate incidents began lining up. After Lily was born, I had mentioned reopening the separate savings account I used before our marriage. Daniel told me it would look like I didn't trust him. Whenever I made plans to visit my parents, Patricia somehow knew before I told her, because Daniel told her. When Patricia started insisting that I announce where I was going before leaving the house, Daniel called it basic courtesy. And for 11 days, every time I asked about my car, he told me to be patient. He hadn't been waiting for Patricia to return it. He had known exactly what she was doing. I zipped Lily's suitcase. You weren't trying to keep the peace. Daniel frowned. What's that supposed to mean? You were helping her. That's not fair. You gave her the key. I was trying to stop the fighting. You stopped me from driving. The fighting continued just fine. I picked up my laptop and slid it into my bag. Daniel watched me. So what, you're leaving because your dad told you to? No. I lifted Lily from the crib. I'm leaving because your mother took my car and my husband helped her do it. Downstairs, Patricia was waiting near the bottom step. She looked at my bags and shook her head. You'll be back once you've calmed down. I adjusted Lily on my hip. I don't know when I'm coming back. Patricia's expression shifted. I looked at her one last time. Give me my car. No. Dad picked up my suitcase. Okay, that single word seemed to irritate Patricia more than another argument would have. She looked at him. Okay? Dad opened the front door. We're leaving. Then he turned to me. Betty, don't delete anything. Save every message about that car. I nodded. Daniel followed us onto the porch. Betty, we can deal with this tomorrow. I put Lily into Dad's truck. You've had 11 tomorrows. Then I got in. At my parents' house, Dad went straight to the cabinet in his home office. What are you looking for? He pulled out an old folder. I kept copies from when you bought the car. I stared at him. Inside were copies of paperwork from years earlier, when Dad had gone with me to inspect the vehicle before I purchased it. My name, my purchase, long before Daniel. Dad placed the documents on the desk. From now on, we stop arguing about what everyone thinks they're entitled to. We document what happened. I pulled out my phone. There was already plenty. A message from Patricia. You'll get the car back when you learn some respect. Another exchange showed Daniel acknowledging that his mother had the vehicle. I took screenshots of everything. Then I texted Daniel, where is my car? I want the address. His reply came 2 minutes later. Can we please talk tomorrow? I typed back, if my vehicle is not returned, I will formally report that it is being withheld from me. Where is it? Nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then 7. My phone finally buzzed. An address appeared. I showed Dad. That's not Patricia's house. Another message arrived. It's in Mum's detached garage at her other property. My pulse quickened. Then Daniel sent one more. I drove it there. I used the spare. I read that sentence twice. There was no misunderstanding left. Patricia had ordered it. Daniel had moved it. And both of them had knowingly left me without my own transportation until I became obedient enough to earn it back. Dad was still reading Daniel's message when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Patricia, he answered. Hello? Her voice was loud enough that I heard every word. Tell Betty if she reports that car, she can forget about ever coming back into my house. I held out my hand. Give me the phone. Dad passed it over without saying anything. I put it to my ear. Patricia. There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. Betty, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing. If you report that car, you will not be welcome back here. For months, that threat had worked. Whenever Patricia reminded me that the house belonged to her, I pictured packing Lily's crib, finding a deposit for an apartment, returning to work before I was ready, and watching our savings disappear. That fear had bought my silence more times than I wanted to admit. But now I was standing in my parents' house. Lily was asleep in the next room. My car paperwork was spread across Dad's desk. And Daniel had just admitted in writing that he had personally driven my car away. So I answered differently. Then I won't come back. Silence. Not the calculated silence Patricia usually used before delivering another warning. Actual silence. What did you say? I said I won't come back under those conditions. Betty, don't be ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous. You took something that belongs to me because you wanted to control where I went. I was trying to teach you. I'm 31 years old. You don't get to teach me obedience by taking my car. You live in my house. Not anymore. I ended the call. My hand was shaking, but I didn't call her back. Dad looked at me. You okay? I nodded. Then I looked at Daniel's message again. For the first time, I could see the whole thing without separating it into little excuses. Patricia's house had started as help, then help became leverage. Leverage became rules. Rules became permission. Permission became control. And Daniel had spent months standing beside his mother, calling each new restriction reasonable. The car was simply the first time that control had become impossible to ignore. I texted Daniel, I want immediate access to my vehicle. I also want access to collect the rest of my belongings. You've confirmed in writing that you moved my car. If I'm denied access, I'll make a formal report. His answer came quickly this time. I'll meet you at the garage. Dad picked up his keys. Let's go. The detached garage was behind a small property Patricia owned, about 15 minutes away. Daniel was already there when we arrived. He stood beside the garage door with his hands in his pockets. I got out of Dad's truck. Open it. Betty, can we talk first? Open the garage. He stared at me for a second, then entered the code. The door lifted, and there it was, my car, exactly where Daniel had hidden it. Seeing it made something twist inside me. For 11 days, I had walked to stores, rescheduled Lily's appointment, calculated distances before leaving the house, and my car had been sitting untouched inside Patricia's garage. I took out my phone and photographed it from every side. Daniel sighed. Do you really need to do that? Yes. I checked the interior and started the engine. Then I held out my hand. The spare. Betty. The key, Daniel. He reached into his pocket and placed it in my palm. I closed my fingers around it. Come home, he said. We need to discuss this privately. I looked through the rear window. Lily was secured in her car seat. Then I looked back at my husband. We had 11 days to discuss it privately. I didn't think Mom would keep it this long. You knew I was walking. I never told you to walk. You knew I didn't have transportation. I thought you two would work it out. You watched your wife carry your baby to stores because confronting your mother was harder. Daniel's face tightened. I never intended to hurt you. I'm not discussing your intentions anymore. A vehicle pulled into the driveway behind Dad's truck. Patricia, she got out and marched toward us. So this is what we're doing now? Turning the entire family against me? Dad stayed where he was, I answered. No one is turning anybody against you. You brought your father into my private business. You made my transportation your business. I gave you a home, and I appreciated that. Patricia looked almost triumphant until I continued. But giving us temporary housing did not buy you authority over my property. It did not buy you authority over my marriage. It did not buy you authority over my child. And it definitely did not buy you the right to decide when I'm allowed to leave. Her expression hardened. If that's how you feel after everything I've done, it is. I got into my car. Dad followed me home in his truck. And for the first time in 11 days, I drove myself. That night, I changed passwords. The next morning, I separated the accounts Daniel could access from the money that was mine and resumed control of my personal savings. I saved every message about the car. When I returned for the rest of my belongings, I gave advance notice and made sure I had support with me. I wasn't going back into another private argument where 3 people could tell me I had misunderstood what happened. I also spoke with a family law attorney, not because I wanted some dramatic revenge. I needed to understand my options and protect Lily and myself correctly. Daniel kept insisting this could be fixed. At first, he seemed convinced I would spend a week at my parents' house, calm down and return. I didn't. When he asked what it would take for me to consider reconciliation, I gave him clear conditions. You acknowledge what happened. We never live with your mother again. We have complete financial transparency. Your mother gets permanent boundaries. And we go to counseling. Daniel stared at me. You're making it sound like I abused you. I'm telling you what you did. I was caught between my wife and my mother. No? You took a spare key to your wife's car and used it to move that car somewhere she couldn't access it. I was trying to keep everyone calm. That sentence is exactly why we're here. He could apologize for the argument. He could apologize that I was upset. He could apologize that things went too far. What he struggled to do was acknowledge that he had participated. And without that, there was nothing for me to rebuild on. When the minimizing continued, I began formal separation proceedings. Patricia reacted exactly as I expected. She told relatives Dad had interfered in my marriage and taken me away. But that version didn't survive basic questions. Why did Betty leave? Because Patricia had taken my car. For how long? 11 days. Whose car? Mine. How did Patricia move it? Daniel gave her the spare, then drove it to her other property. I didn't need to campaign against Patricia. I simply stopped protecting her reputation with my silence. If relatives asked me directly, I answered directly. The woman who had always presented herself as the generous mother-in-law, who did everything for us, suddenly had to explain why generosity required controlling my transportation. Over the following months, the balance completely changed. Patricia still owned her house, but I no longer lived under its roof. She could no longer threaten me with homelessness to end an argument. She could no longer control my transportation because my keys stayed with me. Daniel could no longer assume I would tolerate his silence because leaving would be inconvenient. I had left. And yes, rebuilding was harder. I returned to work. Eventually, I rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment close enough to my workplace and Lily's childcare to make our routine manageable. It was smaller than Patricia's house. My budget was tighter. I had to plan everything carefully, but nobody stood near the front door asking where I was going when I picked up my keys. Nobody questioned whether I had visited my parents too recently. Nobody could take away my transportation because I disagreed with them. Dad helped, but there was an important difference. If I asked for help, he helped. If I said, I've got it, he stepped back. He never made assistance feel like ownership. That difference taught me something I should have understood much earlier. My mistake hadn't been accepting help. My mistake had been allowing other people to turn their help into permission. I had avoided arguments because I thought avoiding conflict meant keeping peace. It didn't. It simply gave Patricia and Daniel more room to make decisions that should have belonged to me. I didn't become louder after that. I became clearer. Daniel remained involved with Lily through the arrangements established during our separation. But whether our marriage might once have been repairable eventually stopped being the question that controlled my decisions. I knew one thing permanently. I would never again live somewhere my basic independence could be withdrawn as punishment. Months later, Dad came by my apartment one afternoon. I had Lily on my hip as we walked toward the parking lot. Dad followed us outside, glanced around dramatically, then looked at me. You driving today? I laughed. My car was parked a few spaces away. I lifted my hand. The keys were already in it. The night my father asked where my car was, I thought he was helping me get it back. What he really helped me recover was the right to decide where my own life was going, and nobody has held those keys since.